In section 9.3, we solved equations using square roots. Before we can use square roots to solve, we need to get the squared term by itself. So if we look at number 1, we have an x squared. We want to start by getting the x squared by itself first, then we can solve using square roots. In order to get the x squared by itself, we first want to add 5 to both sides of the equation. So 2x equals 18. 2x squared equals 18. We need to also move the 2 before we can do the square root. So divide both sides by 2. X squared equals 9. Now that the x squared is by itself, to undo the squared, I can take the square root. So we end up with x equals, you could do the plus minus with the 3, or you could do x equals positive 3, or x equals negative 3. Either way you want to write that. In number 2, same idea. Before we can take the square root, we need to get the x squared by itself first. My first step would be to add 30 to both sides of the equation. We end up with 4x squared equals negative 20. Next step, we need to move the 4. So to undo multiplying by 4, we divide by 4. So now x squared equals negative 5. I have the x squared by itself, so now to undo that squared, I can take the square root of both sides. So now I end up with x equals, square root of negative 5 though, I can't think of a number squared. That would give me a negative. If you want to try it out in your calculator, you can. If you try to take the square root of negative 5, it's going to tell you error or unreal answer. And it's exactly right. We can't take the square root of a negative. This one would be no real solutions. Last but not least, in section 9.3, if we look at question number 3, now we don't just have an x squared, we have a whole quantity x plus 2 squared. To undo the squared, I take the square root of both sides. All that happens on the left, taking the square root undoes the squared, so we're left with x plus 2. But now the square root of 9, it could be positive 3, or it could be negative 3. Notice the plus minus part happens with the 3. X plus 2 stays the same for both solutions. Subtract 2 from both sides, x equals 1. X equals negative 5. Do you need both solutions? The answer is yes.